Welcome to episode 4 of our High Street Histories. I'm Dean Parkin and
I'm Ivan Bunn.
And we're walking down Lowestoft's historic High Street, and we've got to number 41 and 42, and we're time travelling back to the 1960s, and here is Ronnie Cook's butcher's shop.
All of the shops that you see in this photograph, the buildings date back to the 18th and 19th century. Most of them were private large dwelling houses rather than shops. The shop fronts were added later as the town prospered and expanded in the 19th, 20th century, so shop fronts were added. 41, 42 High Street, they are listed because of their mid-19th century character, and there were changes to the facades, as we shall see in a moment, to these things. So the shop fronts didn't always look the same. As different businesses took over, they would change the shop fronts to suit their tastes and the needs of their business.
It's interesting, this is 1960, so we haven't got any horses and carts or carriages like we've seen in the other episodes. We've got the only mode of transport we've got there are the two bikes left outside the shops, which I'm not sure you'd be able to get away with today. But it's got more modern look, hasn't it, to it?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And there's one thing here that's quite interesting, sort of architecturally, worth a comment, is if you look on the gable end, that's the north end of 41 High Street, you can see X's. And those are not painted on there. They are the ends of long metal beams that have been thrust completely through the building, and then the ends stick out, and then they have these large cross irons put on with a large bolt, which have been put in years and years ago when it looks as if the wall is beginning to sag and bow. So they're put in there to strengthen the building.
And they're still there today.
And they will, as long as that building stands, they will have to be there. Yeah. If you look to the extreme right, there is a white building there with a little window that sticks out over the street.
Okay, well, let's put an arrow up there. There it is, yeah.
And we can move down and travel back in time to around about the time of 1914, the outbreak of World War I. Yeah. And we can see that's the shop that stood there.
George Hayes, General Ironmonger.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to look in the shop window and you can see there, because you don't get ironmongers so much these days, do you?
Yeah, an ironmonger, for those who are not familiar with the word, was somebody who sold anything that was looking for a way to metal, really.
Made of
the iron.
I suppose you've got those places like Home Base, haven't you now, and places like that sell things like buckets and things like that. And also, this was in the days before plastic. There was no plastic, was there? So your buckets were made of iron. Your watering cans were made of iron. There was just a lot of iron goods, wasn't there? And you've got, I think it looks like a doormat hanging down.
Yes,
there.
I think those are doormats. We've got a large bath there. We've got watering cans. We've got buckets. If we could climb into this picture and walked into that shop, it would be like an Aladdin's cave. Interesting features here, if we start at the top, that there is, in actual fact, the Elizabethan coat of arms of the town of Lowestoft. It's not there anymore. We know that this was once a private dwelling house in the 18th century. Mr. John Jex, who was a wealthy merchant, he lived here.
There's a story, isn't there, that John Jex put the king up for the night, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Back in the early 1700s, the king was travelling, sailing past Lowestoft and to go to London, and there was a dreadful storm. and they were frightened the ship would founder. So a load of local fishermen waded out into the surf, picked up the boat, the small boat that the king had been transferred into, and carried it on their shoulders safely ashore, where it was greeted by Mr. John Jex, who lived in this house, and the king apparently spent the night there.
You can't imagine a soggy king, can you?
No.
Being brought up those Brent score.
Yeah, so as you say, the other interesting features, by the pavement on each side of the entrance to the shop, you can see what appear to be small windows. Oh, yeah. These are in actual fact openings into the cellars of the building.
So would that provide light for the cellars?
It would provide light, and also when it was a house, or possibly even while it's a shop, again, there's no rear access to this property unless you climb the cliff up the steps and that. Go back into the day when the main fuel being used was coal. Coal would need to be delivered to these places, and quite often the coal would be shot down a ramp here into the cellar below.
Okay.
And they're a feature, a very, very common feature of that time. And of course, to get to the back of the house, there's the inevitable passage taking you through and round into the yard at the back of the house on the east side of High Street.
It's still a shop today, isn't it?
There we are, that's the same. We can see some of the notable changes there. For instance, the lights leading into the two basements have gone. They've been bricked up and just air bricks have been put into their place. The coat of arms has gone and there's a burglar alarm.
But it has got a plaque, hasn't it, saying that John Jex lived here and the king stayed the night.
There. And for the sake of privacy, a lockable gate has now been put on to the side.
But it's interesting that it's Uncle Sid's Zero Waste store, which is very much a store of a shop of today, isn't it?
Yes.
It's trying to discourage the use of plastic. So you have to bring your own containers in, don't you, and buy your produce that way.